Hello and welcome USZ to your favorite sports talk radio show, Bix and K. Back with you on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. And those of you tuning in on my Facebook Live might notice that there is no one over here to my left. Kay is out of town this week. He is traveling right now. Just sent me a Snapchat. Believe he's on a plane somewhere. So Kay, gonna miss you this week, but I'm gonna handle things myself from here, and hopefully everyone out there will like it. So today's show is gonna be a little bit shorter since Kay is not with me. But those of you that have followed the show for a long time know that last semester I did a show by myself as well, and we're just going to take a little time today to delve into a topic that is near and dear to my heart and something that Kay doesn't necessarily like to talk about a whole lot, and that is Major League Baseball. As you all know, we've talked a lot about opening day and how we've gotten underway in the new Major League Baseball season the last couple days. But what I want to address today is this notion that baseball is seemingly in, or is described to be in, somewhat of a purgatory right now. League officials are trying to find a way to grow the game, appeal to the younger generation, and retain viewers that have matured a little bit but are just simply getting bored with the game. So hopefully you'll join us today. I'll be with you all probably for about an hour from 2:30 to 3:30 on this fine afternoon. And as I am the only one here today, my Facebook live feed is the only way that I will be able to interact with all of you listeners. So please, if at any moment you have anything you want to share, comments, questions, something you want me to talk about on the show, please let me know. But again, we're focusing in on baseball this week. So all you baseball fans out there, get ready. We're underway. So, going back to what I just mentioned, the state of Major League Baseball is kind of in limbo right now. The league is trying to appeal to all sorts of different crowds in order to make sure that the league, quote unquote, doesn't die out. After all, baseball is America's pastime. It always has been, and in my opinion, it always will be. So, addressing this initial question of what's the problem with Major League Baseball, you could probably ask a whole lot of people that same question, and they'd give you all sorts of answers, from the game's stars are too young to it's just not a marketable sport. But really, they're all wrong. The answer is that baseball has no problem. The sport, contrary to popular belief, is not dying off. Now let me give you a couple numbers to back this up. The National Football League leads all professional sports leagues in the entire world in revenue. It makes about $12 to $13 billion per calendar year, which is pretty amazing. Now, the second league on that list, second highest earning league of any sport across the entire world, is Major League Baseball, making about $10 billion a year. That's above the NBA, which only makes $5 to $6 billion a year, above the Premier League over in England, above the NHL, and above any league besides the NFL. So the notion that baseball is dying out is just wrong. It's factually incorrect. The game is in fact growing, which may be a surprise to a whole lot of viewers, because all we've heard, especially the last couple of years, is this doom and gloom sense of the game is done for, stars are retiring, we don't know who to follow, when in fact the era is just turning over and we're starting a new cycle that will be even more prosperous for the sport of baseball. So, delving into things a little bit, Major League Baseball employs a whole lot of smart people, and they're not just going to let the game die out. The league office, as we've heard over the last couple months or so, is especially working on new rules within the game to speed things up, make things more interesting for the casual fan, in an effort to draw in some of these crowds that they are so-called losing. But also, when you look at it now, it's true that baseball is in somewhat of an identity crisis. And this crisis is different than the actual popularity of the sport. Baseball is popular, baseball makes money, they don't have problems filling stadiums unless, you're the San Diego Padres, and you still need a couple years to rebound, but that's beside the point. This identity crisis is in the fact that as a league, there is no LeBron. There is not that singular player where I believe when NBA fans were surveyed about who their favorite NBA player was, somewhere around 25%, 20 to 25% said that favorite player was LeBron. When you go over and do that same survey with fans of Major League Baseball, no single player garnered above 2.9% of votes saying so-and-so is my favorite player. And that, I believe, was Kris Bryant, who is relatively new to the game. So there is no LeBron in baseball, and there never will be a LeBron in baseball, because the way the sport works, that just won't happen. There is no player that can come in and be LeBron's level of dominant over his entire career. It just doesn't work that way. Baseball is a fickle sport. You go through your ups and downs, and there is not someone that every night... LeBron has put up at least double-digit points every game for the last decade of his career. The last time he didn't was back in the early 2000s. There is no baseball equivalent to that. Even the best players will go through their respective slumps. So I started thinking about this, and I asked myself, who is one of the most known players in baseball today, who's been around for a long time, that I could even semi-compare to LeBron, to give you a sense of things. And I came up with Angels first baseman Albert Pujols. If you look at Albert's stats throughout his career, he spent the better part of his career with the St. Louis Cardinals from 2001 to 2011, first decade. Every year for the first decade of his career, he hit 300 or above. He hit over 29 home runs in every single one of those years. And he had at least, on average, 170 hits per year. A couple down years towards the end, 159, 160, that's still not far off. That is close to as dominant as it gets in a sport like baseball, and yet the last couple years, since he's been traded to the Angels, so from 2012 to now 2017, he has, quote-unquote, fallen off the wagon. And he's hit under 300, granted not by much, a couple seasons at 285, 272, still with a whole lot of power, around 30 home runs, 40 home runs in 2015. The one down year he had 17 home runs because he only played in 99 games, which most of you know, a baseball season is 162 games long. That's a significant portion of the season to miss. So you look at Albert Pujols as one of these final old era, if you will, players back with the David Ortiz, the Alex Rodriguez, the Derek Jeters of the world. And he is one of the lasting figures from that generation. One of the final ones that will be around when he eventually retires. It will be interesting to see which direction the league goes in, because despite the fact that he is so well known, he's still not the face of baseball, and he's not LeBron. He's been maybe not quite as dominant as LeBron has been in respect to the NBA, but what Albert Pujols has done is incredible when you look at the numbers across his career. 592 home runs. That's historic, really. He's going to be potentially in the top 10 by the time he finishes his career in home runs. He's a 300 plus career hitter. So he's done everything, but no athlete can reach the level of what LeBron James does in the NBA, and that's part of the reason that that Major League Baseball as a sport is so much less marketable than the NBA or the NFL. The guys, it's just an incredibly tough. We're not saying that other sports aren't as difficult, but to sustain the level of success that you have over 162 games a season for 16 seasons like Pujols has had in Major League Baseball, it's incredibly difficult. And again, Pujols is not bad now. He's not putting up numbers like he did in the first 10 years of his career, but he still has to be considered one of the best hitters in baseball right now, even if he's not performing like he did when he was 26, 27. And that leads me into what's next for Major League Baseball. Because, like I mentioned, you have Albert Pujols, you have A-Rod, Derek Jeter, David Ortiz. You think back even a couple of years to guys like Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Jr. This old guard of Major League Baseball players, and I call them old guard for those of my generation, those a little bit older than me, have their iconic players of their generation, but I'm just talking about right now. These guys are starting to be phased out, and that leaves a big gap in our national pastime. You take a second to look at the best players around the league now, and the argument can be made that the game's best talent currently is no older than 26. You look at Mike Trout, 25 years old. Bryce Harper, 24 years old. Chris Bryant, Mookie Betts, Nolan Arenado, Manny Machado, Corey Seager, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Correa, Noah Syndergaard, Kyle Schwarber, all 26 or under. This is where baseball is headed. This is the new generation. But the thing that makes that difficult right now is not the player's talent, because obviously they're incredibly good at what they do. We've already seen a couple of these guys like Lindor, like Chris Bryant, like an Anthony Rizzo play in a World Series and win one. But they don't have the tenure that some of the older players in the league do. And you look around other professional sports leagues too, like I mentioned, your LeBrons, your Tom Brady's, Peyton Manning, even a guy like Sidney Crosby in the National Hockey League. They've been around for so long, they've paid their dues, they've won their championships. You can write that story. That's a book waiting to happen, and no matter what they do now, they're just adding to that legacy. Everyone can recite the LeBron story, the Tom Brady story. No one right now can recite the Manny Machado story. And he will be a Hall of Famer one day, and he will deserve that recognition, but he's only 25. And so you can't possibly have a guy that young who, although, yes, he's done a lot of good things, be your face of your entire league. Because like with Albert Pujols, you can be good for 10 years, 10 plus 12 years even, and you have 2-3 down years, maybe not even bad, just down compared to your expected stats, and all of a sudden everyone's like, what's wrong? What's the issue here? There's something's not right. When in fact, it's just not possible to sustain that kind of output over the course of a 17-year career. Bodies deteriorate. Guys get old. The game is hard. 162 games a year takes a toll on a guy. And it's not just those 162 games. It's spring training. It's that time in the offseason, even between the end of the postseason and spring training where guys still have to be staying in shape. They can take a 2-week vacation with their family, but baseball is a year-round sport. And I don't know that there are too many other leagues that can make that argument. The NBA and the NFL, sure, you're working on your skills all year round, but a top-level quarterback, a Tom Brady, has more time in his offseason to relax and do what he wants than a Mike Trout. Mike Trout is the best player in baseball, but he has to constantly be working in order to maintain that status. And even then, Mike Trout is probably the most marketable player in baseball right now. He is the best player, undoubtedly, in the league. In my opinion, will probably finish top 10 all-time. Shoe-in Hall of Famer if he keeps up what he's doing, barring injury or, just an unforeseen drop-off in his production. But Mike Trout, probably pretty good bet for the future to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But again, young guy. If he's walking around on the street, the odds that someone recognizes him outside of LA are probably not very high. Obviously, you have your baseball fans everywhere that know the game well and are avid followers and will be able to pick someone out of a crowd. But if you pick someone besides Mike Trout, like an Adam Wainwright, pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. He walks around in downtown St. Louis, and yeah, okay, maybe he gets recognized by a couple people. Cardinals fans should know him pretty well, see his face a lot, but you take that same player, great pitcher, has had a long career, been saddled with injuries a little bit towards the end here, but for the most part, a solid pitcher over the course of his career in Major League Baseball. You take Adam Wainwright out of St. Louis, you have him walk around Times Square in New York, or down in South Beach in Miami, out by the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, in LA, anywhere. And there ain't no one out there that's going to recognize him. Not one person. So, baseball is looking for a way to market these young players in a way that will help the game continue to thrive. And a lot of people are worried that if baseball can't find that one young player to market and make the face of their game, that it's going to die out. When that's not the fact at all. Sure, Major League Baseball executives would love to find that guy, and they would love to have a LeBron of their sport because it would bring in so much revenue. But baseball is, and always has been, a sport of regions. And to me, that's why it makes it so special. I don't want a LeBron. I'm happy being from San Francisco, having my Madison Bumgarner, my Buster Posey, and guys that will be the face of our organization. Everyone in the Bay Area knows who those guys are. But over on the East Coast, yeah, the two guys have had a lot of success, and people probably have heard the names and know who they are. But it's not the same for a Nationals fan, maybe, as a Ryan Zimmerman or a Bryce Harper. Every city is going to have their particular players, and that's what makes it impossible for baseball to market one star player across the entire league. It's just not how it works. And on top of that, it's difficult for fans to follow along to a point where they would even have that one player that they love so much. For the casual Major League Baseball fan, it's work. It's a job to follow your team. There's no downtime. There's 162 games a season. Your team is playing almost every night, and especially a lot of people follow more intently during the summer when there's less going on. You have to be in tune every day to be keeping up with just your team, let alone the entire league. And if you're, like me, going to school in San Diego, but your favorite team's in San Francisco, you need to have some sort of way of watching that team to keep up with them. I have an account on MLB.tv. Fortunate enough to be able to watch the Giants any night that I want. I can't watch every game necessarily. I'm a college kid. Life is busy. And most people out in the workforce, same for them. You can't watch a game every night, but you have that option to, and it's there. And you have the opportunity to at least try to follow along as intently as possible to your team. A lot of people don't have access to that. So if for some reason you move out of your city, you go out of your city, even if you go on vacation for a week, you don't have a way of intently following your team. Sure, you can hop on your phone and check your ESPN app and see the box score, but you can't really intently follow your favorite team. Again, it's just not how it works. Now, moving into this idea of the youth is the future of the sport. There's been a lot of talk in Major League Baseball about how we being the league, has to reach out to younger generations of fans, little leaguers now, in order to make sure that they stay with the game, that they don't give it up, that they continue to idolize some of these top talents in the league that we have today. But really, I don't know that that's as big of an issue as it's made out to be. Now, I don't have numbers in front of me. I don't know how many kids are playing Little League Baseball every year, how many proceed to high school and then college and so on. But baseball's always been America's pastime. There will always be little leagues all across the country. It's not something that's going to fade away. Baseball is a game that has the allure of tradition. And that's why now, when you see people and hear people talking about, oh, we need to make this, that, and the other change to the game in order to make it more exciting, the vast majority of fans are sitting there saying, wait a minute, what are you talking about? My game is fine just the way it is. And a lot of Major League players feel the same way too. There's no need to change anything. I understand the pace of play rules that the commissioner is trying to instill, but there's no strict way of enforcing that. Even with fines, guys are going to do what they're going to do. It's not a game that you can change. It's not something that would be better changed. It's something that, nothing is ever perfect, but it's a game that's fine just the way it is. Obviously, the league is going to continue in their promotion efforts, and they're going to do what they can to get the Lindors and the Chris Bryants and the Manny Machados and the Bryce Harpers out there in order to make sure the game stays relevant amongst other sports, at least in the news. But there's no need for these drastic changes like some people have proposed. And the other side, the flip side of this tradition coin with baseball is that, like I mentioned earlier in the show, it's an incredibly difficult sport. And you look over at the NBA now. Again, NBA, incredibly difficult league, same thing, but so many records are being broken right now in the NBA that we're becoming, as fans, immune to it. It's not special anymore. Guys like Steph Curry shooting up threes every game, hitting more and more threes every season, setting records every season. Russell Westbrook just got the triple-double record, 42 in a season. Incredible feat, but who cares? Honestly, I don't. It's not a big deal. There's just no sense of something special around it. Granted, it's something incredibly difficult to do. There's a reason that triple-double record stood for as long as it did, but guys in the league today are incredibly different from what they were 30 years ago. And again, the same thing goes for baseball, but in basketball, when you get players that are bigger, stronger, faster, that's going to give you better results, and that's going to make it easier for these players, like Russell Westbrook, to break records. I was just looking at a video Colin Cowherd put today. He was talking on his show about LeBron and Michael Jordan and other famous basketball players, Bill Russell, Oscar Robertson. The latter two, your Bill Russells and your Oscar Robertsons, those guys were playing talent that, whoever they were playing, they had other jobs on the weekend. The guys playing now, the guys that LeBron and even Michael Jordan played, they're not doing anything else. Basketball is their sport. They're incredibly talented. It's still a difficult game, but with guys that physically can do so much more now than they could 30 years ago, the records are easier to break. It's just that simple. Whereas you look at baseball, and I like to compare the triple-double record to something like the all-time hit streak. Joe DiMaggio, 56 games. I can't see anyone, as good as the players are in the league now, I don't see anyone breaking that record anytime soon. 56 games. 56-game hit streak. I don't know if a lot of people comprehend how difficult that actually is. Mike Trout's not getting close to 56. Albert Pujols isn't getting close to 56. Bryce Harper isn't getting close to 56. It's just not something that happens, and this tradition aspect of baseball where you have these difficult records that will stand for years and years makes it more alluring because it's always about the chase. You will have unique guys that come along every couple years, like you have your once-in-a-lifetime player and a guy like Barry Bonds, who he was a freak of nature and he hit his 762 home runs, but people are going to be chasing that record forever. I don't know if there's a player in the game right now that'll get close. One of the closest guys is probably Albert Pujols, like I mentioned earlier, at 592, but he's 37. He's not hitting 150 more home runs in his career. Baseball is about the chase. And that's what makes it so special. Compared to other leagues like the NBA and the NFL, where players getting bigger, faster, stronger, more physical just makes it easier for them to surpass all of these feats that were set years ago. So it's difficult to compare major sports around the U.S., but baseball is certainly special in this aspect of tradition. Another guy that could potentially get close to breaking a lot of records is Miguel Cabrera. Miguel Cabrera, another guy like Albert Pujols, he's been around for a long time. He's been around since the early 2000s. He's got 2 MVP awards, over 2,000 hits, probably the best shot, he or Pujols, to break Barry Bonds' home run record, even though there's not a huge chance of him doing that. And he's been to a World Series. He's won a World Series in 2003 with the Miami Marlins. But again, he can be that good, and he's still chasing. He's still chasing Bond's record. He's still chasing 3,000 hits. So, again, you have these players at the very top end of the game, some of the best talent in all of baseball, and they still gotta chase, and you don't know if they're gonna get there. In basketball, once Russell Westbrook started doing his thing, middle of the season, had 17, 18 triple-doubles, there wasn't a doubt in anyone's mind that he was breaking that record. Miguel Cabrera, I don't know. Will he break a home run record? Maybe. We'll just have to wait and find out. It's not the same. Baseball is different from everything else in that sense. And then you go into the actual game itself. The 9 innings of baseball, played in front of fans every night. Talked about a couple of the things the commissioner is trying to do to make the game more exciting. But really, the excitement comes from you as a fan sticking to your team or sticking to your favorite player and finding ways to get excited. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's on you as a fan to get excited about what is going on. The media is not going to do it for you in a sport where one extra hit every 16 at-bats separates a 320 hitter from a 260 hitter. It's not that noticeable. Using Miguel Cabrera as an example again. You're a fan going to, let's say, a Padres game here in San Diego over a weekend. The Detroit Tigers are coming to town. You're a fan of Miguel Cabrera. You want to see him play. You're excited. He comes in, doesn't have a great series, maybe gets 2 or 3 hits, doesn't really ever come up in a situation where there are runners on or where there are men in scoring position. Maybe the pitcher doesn't give him anything to hit. They walk him a couple times. You leave that game, and Miguel Cabrera leaves that series having honestly not done much, and you didn't really get your money's worth because you didn't see your favorite player do something incredible like you hoped you would. Whereas you saw a guy like Hunter Renfroe for the Padres go 5 for 9, a couple home runs, and a triple. Now, you didn't get to see your favorite player do what you wanted him to do, but you get this unexpected side where it may not be your favorite player, it may not even be your favorite team, but you saw a guy do something pretty freaking cool, and true baseball fans learn to find the excitement in those moments. Now, there are exceptions when your team gets clobbered or when someone walks off against you. Obviously, you're not going to be happy for the guy, but going to a game, you learn to appreciate everything you see. Even if you're unhappy with the outcome, even if your team got destroyed, your favorite player got hurt, whatever it may be, you see a guy on the other team hit for the cycle or hit 2, 3 home runs in a game, that's something pretty cool. And that's where people have to understand a lot of the excitement in baseball comes from. You have to make it yourself. And that's the difficult part, because not everyone understands that, not everyone gets that, and not everyone wants to get that. But baseball has its fan base, and that's not going to change. It's not going to shrink significantly. If anything, it's just going to continue to grow. And that moves me into my next point, which is going back to the culture of the game. Baseball itself has kind of shot itself in the proverbial foot because the players around the league commonly understand that they can't be as out there, they can't have as big personalities as guys that play in the NBA, as guys that play in the NHL or the NFL. They can be unique and they can have their personality, but they can't express themselves in a way that most other athletes can. Think about a lot of the issues we've had in the last couple years with things in our society in general. Things like Colin Kaepernick's protest, like the Black Lives Matter movement, and all sorts of these important issues in our culture and society today. You can think of guys in the NFL, like I mentioned Kaepernick. You can think about Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, NBA stars voicing their opinions and making themselves heard and being activists for these sort of issues. In baseball, you can't. If you take a minute to think about it, there's no one player that's really standing out on a consistent basis and making noise about these things. And of course, it's not something an athlete's going to do every night, but it's something that should be happening. They're role models for our society, but there's just a common understanding in baseball that for some reason that's not how it works. Guys don't speak out. I guarantee you that if you were to make your way around every clubhouse around the league in baseball, you would find a whole lot of great personalities and big characters that you had no idea existed. Absolutely no idea. And again, that goes back to this idea that that's just how the game is played. Which makes sense because that's how it's always been. But this is one of the areas in which Major League Baseball can improve. I mentioned early at the beginning of the show that baseball's not losing fans, it's not in danger of dying out, but there are things that they can do better. And they can certainly market their game better. And part of that starts with letting guys be themselves. And that doesn't just stop at upper management. Teammates have to accept the fact that some of their brothers in arms, some of their teammates are going to get a little more recognition. And that's okay. You look around the league, there's guys like Joey Bats, Jose Bautista, Rougned Odor for the Texas Rangers. They got into their scrap last season. They get into the media. That's a lot of what happens in baseball. When guys have big personalities, it's usually framed in a negative manner. They get into fights. They have disputes with their management, and that's just sort of how it works because baseball suppresses the guys that have such great things to offer. In the NFL and the NBA, you get guys celebrating everywhere. It's great. You get to know really what's on their mind. Major League Baseball, it doesn't happen. And part of it is this idea that you have to have respect for the game. And you do, but you can also, there's room to be yourself. There are a lot of guys out there, like Mike Trout, who all they want to do is go to work, get their hits, get their hacks in, make their plays, and go home. And that's great. But you have a lot of these other bigger personalities that the league isn't taking advantage of. And if they really want to market themselves better, they'll let these players be themselves in post-game interviews and let them do their thing without fear of retribution in any way. And like I mentioned, the players need to get better at this too. You take a guy like R.A. Dickey, great season a couple years ago for the New York Mets. Cy Young Award winner, was absolutely fantastic. But he started getting a little notoriety, probably got a little bit full of himself, because it's hard not to in that kind of situation. That was the year he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He had a book come out about his life and career. And all of a sudden, he's a little cocky. He gets a lot of media focused on him, and his teammates don't like that as much. And so he gets shipped off to the Toronto Blue Jays and continues his career up in Canada. So just as much as Major League Baseball has to be more accepting of players and their different personalities, so do other players. Because if baseball truly wants to market itself and take a step up onto more of a national stage and have that one guy that's going to transcend the whole sport, that's going to come from a guy being himself, from being natural. And right now, that's something that baseball is really lacking. So it's difficult for them to do what they want to do when they're essentially impeding themselves without even realizing it. So there's a lot of changes that could be made in the majors. There's a whole lot of stuff that the commissioner and his advisors are going to put together. They're going to roll out rule changes for the next however many years, trying to make the game more exciting. But what they don't realize is they're looking at things the wrong way. Baseball doesn't have a problem. Baseball's not dying. Baseball is a $10 billion a year industry. Second highest revenue of any sports league on the face of the planet. There is no problem. It's just that they don't have the face of the game, of their game, that they want. As an avid baseball fan, I'm happy with how baseball is set up into regions right now. I got my Giants, that's all I need. There is no need for a LeBron. I love watching my players chase history. And that's all that matters to me and all that matters to a lot of baseball fans. But if the majors really do want to find that one guy, they're going to have to let him be himself. They're going to have to essentially help promote that one person, because otherwise it's just not going to happen. But again, the allure of baseball, as much as the league wants it to be, will never be in that one guy. There's a lot of talk right now about how it could be a guy like Kris Bryant, graduate of USD right here. Could be the next face of baseball. He's done it all in his young career. He was College Player of the Year, top 5 draft pick. He's already won a World Series, taken the league by storm. He's got the face for it, good-looking guy. He's ready to become that face of the league, just like probably a couple other young players are in Major League Baseball. But that's never where the allure has been. It's always been in the story of the team. And that's why last year's World Series was so compelling. The Cubs just so happened to have a lot of more newly famous guys on their roster. They had their Kris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Jake Arrieta, Jorge Soler, Javier Baez, a whole lot of these young players who are well known. But you look at the other side of the ball, and you got the Cleveland Indians. Most casual baseball fans probably could not name one Indians player that went to the World Series last year. You think of a guy like Francisco Lindor probably being one of the most popular in what was his breakout season. But still, even most avid baseball fans didn't necessarily know who he was until the playoffs or until the World Series. Corey Kluber as the Indians' ace. No one that doesn't follow baseball knew who the heck Corey Kluber was. And you have all these misfits, it looks like on the outside, but if you really jump into it, that's a solid team, and that's what baseball is about. It's about stringing together 162 games and then making a good playoff run as a team. You're always going to have the guys that get recognition and get notoriety because of how good they are, the Mike Trouts of the world that are first ballot Hall of Famers in the future. But baseball is about the team. And if anything, that's what the league should be marketing if they really want to make their sport more popular, or if they simply want to grow their revenue. You sell the story of the Chicago Cubs being in a drought for 100 years before winning the World Series. You sell the story of the Cleveland Indians this year trying to make that comeback. And, you know, if it weren't for 17 minutes of rain, they probably won the World Series last year. And it's about that chase to get back. You sell the story in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Giants. Their even-year streak is over, but what now? Can they make it back again this year? You sell the idea of the Miami Marlins making a run this season, putting together a season for the ages after losing Jose Fernandez and using him as inspiration. I would so much rather watch that story than any particular player. A player will wow you on any given night. I'll go see Giancarlo Stanton hit a 500-foot home run, and that'll be amazing. But give me a historic World Series run, or even a team that just, like the Padres, that's not supposed to do anything this season. If they make it to the playoffs, give me that any day over one particular player. Because that's what makes baseball interesting. And that's why it's going to be popular forever, because it's a collective, and it's something that people do together. It brings people together arguably more than any other sport in terms of being an actual player or in terms of being a fan watching. So that's where baseball is at right now. If you guys have any questions for me in the last couple of minutes of the show, please go for it. I'd love to give you a shout out or talk about anything you'd like me to. But before I wrap up, I wanted to look at the future of baseball. I've talked so much about what it has been and what it is, but where's baseball going? Because clearly, I've said it a couple times already, baseball doesn't have a problem. It's making plenty of money, it's plenty popular, and there is no issue. This baseball is dying, that's just blatantly not true. So the future of baseball, what does it look like? Well, you mentioned a guy like Kris Bryant. I think he's a great candidate for potentially being the next face of the league. And some of these other younger guys I mentioned earlier, you can look at a Manny Machado as being a guy that's going to be a great advocate for the league. Francisco Lindor, incredible talent, going to be around for a long time. Carlos Correa. As a pitcher, Noah Syndergaard. These are the guys that they're young now, and they don't have the saga, they don't have the story of a Barry Bonds or a Derek Jeter. But give them a couple years, by the time these guys are all 30, 31, 32 years old, this will be your face of baseball. It just goes in cycles, and it happens all the time. Every couple decades, there's going to be that gap. You give it a couple years, though, and these guys will be the face of the league. Mike Trout's not going anywhere. Hall of Famer. You got guys like Nolan Arenado. Not a lot of people know him outside of Colorado. But give it a couple years. Once people start realizing the stats that he's put up, he's going to be in that discussion, and he's going to be, you know, the argument for so many years was, who's the face of the league? Is it A-Rod? Is it Barry Bonds? Is it Derek Jeter? Is it Mariano Rivera? A couple years from now, it's going to be, well, you know, Mike Trout has been the guy this whole time, but what about Nolan Arenado? What about Carlos Correa? Corey Seager's having a heck of a year. What about him? Noah Syndergaard. How about our pitchers? So there is a whole crop of young talent out there that will take over this face of the league, but baseball just has to give them time. That's the beauty of the sport. You got to pay your dues. As good as you are when you're young, you're nothing until you prove that you can sustain it and that hopefully you can help your team win. Because that's not going to happen all the time. Mike Trout and the Angels right now, it's just not happening. And he doesn't have to win to prove to anyone that he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but it helps. But still, again, the beauty of baseball, you can be Mike Trout, you can get all this notoriety, you can be the best player in the league, but you can still be humbled and play on a not-so-great team. It's all about the chase. I've said it a lot, but that's what it's all about. And lastly, before I wrap up here, I've gotten the question a lot of, is there anything that baseball can do to really improve itself? And that's a tough question, and it's not something that's answered easily by anyone at the moment. But right now, I think if baseball wants its stars, if they want people to have these household names across the country, we have to get exposure to these guys earlier. There has to be better coverage of college baseball. There has to be better coverage of the minor leagues, essentially, because most people don't pay attention to the minor leagues at all. And when a new young talent gets up to the majors, they have no idea who he is. So baseball has to sell the majors as much as it does the minor leagues, because you get people to get to know guys in their organization when they're in AAA before they come up. You garner excitement for them beyond just the top prospect in the organization. Then by the time they get to their major league club, you already have this hype. You already have people that know about them, and then you can grow their audience to the rest of the country. So that's one possible thing they could do. The other thing is make the minor league experience better. And this is something I'll talk about in the future, but the players that play in the minors right now, that's an incredibly difficult lifestyle. They're barely getting paid unless they're a top prospect, and the odds of them getting to the big leagues are incredibly slim. So if you narrow down the minors and you say, all right, and it's difficult because this puts the dream out of reach for a lot of people, but realistically there's only a certain amount of guys that are ever going to make it to the majors. So if you cut things down to one minor league team, two even, you get rid of the other two teams, you can market the minors a lot better, you can pay the guys better, you can give them a better quality of life. They actually have a shot at getting to the big leagues, and people will be more interested to follow along and know those guys by the time they get up to the big leagues, so that, hey, you already have your star by the time he makes it there. So that's one. And two, baseball, like I said, has to sell the experience and the team over focusing too much on singular players, because people love the narrative. And that's why in foreign countries abroad from the U.S., baseball is easily marketable. It's no problem. Guys like Yasiel Puig coming from Cuba, they have a whole country behind them, hanging on their every at-bat, waiting to see what they do to make their home country proud. Because that's what they're doing it for. And that's what's fun to watch, guys playing for the passion of the game. That's why the World Baseball Classic is so fun. Because you see guys truly playing for the joy of it, like they did as kids. So that's about it. And the beauty of baseball as a sport is that it can't be generalized under one face. Baseball can do the commissioner can do what he wants, try to market certain players, get guys' names out there, and sure, there's some need for that sometimes. You want to know who the stars are in the league, but baseball will always revolve around the team, around the experience, and around the feeling. And that's what's most important. So don't let anyone tell you that baseball is dying out, because clearly it's not. Just tell them that they have to work a little harder to enjoy it. Because that's what it comes down to. And if you're a true fan of baseball, that's what's going to make you happy, and that is what is going to make the game the most fun. So thank you for everyone for tuning in today to Bix and K. I know got a lot of comments throughout the show asking me where K is at. He was gone this week, traveling. We wish him the best. We hope to see him back next week after Easter break. I love doing the show with him, but I'm glad that I was able to connect with you guys today and that I was able to share a little bit about my feelings on Major League Baseball. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciated it. Sorry about the short show today, but one man can only do so much. Got a lot going on. So we hope to see you next week. Your favorite sports radio talk show, Bix and K. Thanks, guys. See you next time.